Good morning. Welcome back to Daybreak, and it's time that we want to have the conversation about the cost of corruption. And to start us off, let me introduce the panel that we have so far. We have Joy Mdivo, who is a former magistrate but also an advocate of the High Court. We also have Gladys Wanga, who is the woman representative for Homa Bay County. She's also the chairperson of the Finance Committee at the National Assembly. We're still waiting for Pio Wandai, who is the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee, to join us shortly. But before he does so, let's take a look at what transpired yesterday in the courtrooms. And we start with Governor Okoth Obado, who was released on a cash bail of 8.75 million shillings after spending some 5 days in police cells. He's facing charges that he participated in misappropriation of 73.4 million shillings. We also know that his sons and daughters were also released, and the total cash bail for the family came to 18.25 million shillings. Of course, that's the story of Okoth Obado, who has also been barred from accessing the office. We'll be looking at the situation with the elective positions, those that have executive authority, comparing with those that do not. We also know that yesterday, Aisha Jumwa, the Member of Parliament for Malindi constituency, of course in Kilifi County, was released by the court in Mombasa. She's facing charges of misappropriation of 19 million shillings, but she was released on a cash bail of 2 million shillings. And of course, she says that she is being fought politically, but all the same, the justice system and its wheels have started the run. Let us now take a look at some of the slides that we have on what has transpired over the past 7 days before I engage the panelists this morning. If we can have those slides and take a look at the situations that have transpired on the cost of corruption. First of all, Ferdinand Waititu is a former governor. He was a governor of Kiambu. He was charged in July 2019, but was released on cash bail of 50 million shillings. And alongside that, the bail terms were that he was barred from office, but in January 2020, he was impeached by the County Assembly of Kiambu and eventually by the Senate. And the case that he's facing is in regards to 580 million shillings scandal that would have gone to operations of the county in development expenditure. Meanwhile, Moses Glenn Kulal, the governor of Samburu, was charged in April 2019 and had initially been released on a cash bail of 100 million shillings, but that was revised downwards to 10 million shillings. And even though he was released, he was barred from accessing his office, which he hasn't done so since May 2019 until now. And the case that he's facing is up to 84 million shillings. Of county money. Then Governor of Nairobi, Mike Sonko, was charged in December 2019. The cash bail that got him released was 15 million shillings, but he was also barred from accessing his office, which he hasn't done so since that time until now. The case that he was facing is 357 million shilling scandal of county money. Then also now Governor Okoth Obado, who was released yesterday, of course, he's been charged in August 2020, released on a cash bail of 8.75 million shillings, again barred from office. The case is in regards to 73.4 million shillings. But there are some other people that do not hold elective offices. Well, let's start with Aisha Jumwa, who was released yesterday, cash bail of 2 million shillings, and the case is in regards to 19 million shillings, like I had said. But the others that do not hold elective offices, one is Daniel Manduku, who is the former Chief Executive Officer of KPA. The case is in regards to 923 million shillings, but the overpayment was up to 244 million shillings. But the cash bill that he was released with was 12 million shillings sometimes last week. Then we also know that Professor Mary Walingo, who is the Vice Chancellor at Masai Mara University, was charged in August 2019. The cash bill that got her released was 10 million shillings, but we understand that she presented a proof of bond of 20 million shillings. She has been barred from accessing the offices of Masai Mara University, and the case is in regards to the expenditure of 177 million shillings that they are said to have misappropriated alongside others. So those are just some of the big names in the corruption cases that have been pursued the past 1 week. And I want to begin with you, Honorable Wanga. So looking at what is transpiring in the courtrooms, do you think it brings confidence to the fight against corruption? Of course, these are not the first people to be released. We've seen other cabinet secretaries and other senior government officials going through the same, but the wheels of justice taking so much time, more than 1 year. Do you think this is finally bringing confidence to the war against corruption?
Yes, I think we are making progress. More always needs to be done. There's always room for improvement. But if you compare what is happening now to what was happening 3-5 years ago, we have made immense progress. We could never imagine seeing sitting senior officials, government officials being arraigned in court and with their families, with their children. You know, these are scenes that we've never really seen. So I want to commend the DPP and the DCI and urge them to continue to work together, even the ESCC, to bring corrupt people to book. And I think in terms of these cases taking time, Sam, previously we were also complaining that, if you do not bring to court watertight cases, then you are unable to prosecute them to the end, then there is a problem. So I personally think you'd rather take your time and make sure by the time you get to court, you have a watertight case. And so I think if I were to answer that question, I think there's good progress. The other one that you haven't mentioned is the case of Waluke, who's currently, been convicted. I think that is a very big step in the right direction. So.
Right. And you're right. Of course, John Waluke, the Member of Parliament for Sirisia constituency, was convicted and sentenced to a couple of years in jail, but also the penalty was amounting to 1 billion shillings. Of course, that matter is still under appeal, I believe. But all the same, Joy Mdivo, with your experience, when you look at this slapping of bail terms, sometimes hefty, sometimes affordable, depending on who is being charged, where does it take the war against corruption and, of course, with the public perception?
Thank you very much, Sam, for having me this morning. We need to remember one thing, and I think it's a matter of civic education that judiciary needs to do for members of the public, is that when you're looking at cash bail or you're looking at bond, what you're trying to ensure is that the accused person turns up in court when the hearing is due. So bond terms are not set as a punishment or a prejudgment. They are set as a means of ensuring that the person appears in court. Mm-hmm. So when you see, for example, there's a lot of hue and cry about bond terms. Like, for example, you gave us the governor of Samburu, when was given 100 million. For members of the public, they are very pleased that that was a very, appropriate bond. But for legal practitioners, it was a bit preposterous, because if the idea is to ensure I come to court and I'm a public official and you put the bond terms too high, you're almost giving me the impression that you have made the decision that I'm guilty before. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to ensure that the fine is deposited before the trial begins. So that's one thing. But the other thing is also, in trying to ensure that somebody turns up in court, you also want to send bond or cash bail terms that are, how do I put it, that means something to the person who is supposed to come to court. Because if it's too low, you can simply forfeit the bond or the cash bail and refuse to appear in court. So there's a delicate balance there in terms of making sure that it is enough to secure your attendance in court, but not too much that it is a prejudgment. I hope that gives you a little bit of context. So that gives an idea as to why you see some of the bond terms and the cash bail terms that we are seeing.
All right. Of course, we'll continue to look into that. But now, Honorable Wanga, of course, we are seeing people raising questions that you see governors, now up to 4, have been barred from accessing their offices. But the same doesn't apply to elected members. For instance, Sirisia Member of Parliament, John Waluke, when he was facing the charges, even before the conclusion of the case, he was still able to go to Parliament and attend to his duties. Maybe you can help us understand the differences in treatment and why those offices are different and warrant to be treated so.
I think, as you said correctly, governors hold executive offices where they continue, if they continue to serve, they continue to day by day execute and be involved in the, running of the counties, management of the resources of the county. If you look at members of parliament, they're essentially legislators, but also that with conviction, such as what Major Waluke has appealed. With conviction now, then there is the loss of seat as per the Constitution. So, I think the idea behind not going to the office is, I think, so that you do not interfere. Since you're an executive, you run day to day, you can hire people, and so on, so that you do not interfere with the investigations as they go on.
Yeah, well, I almost called you honorable, but others say maybe you are. Joe Mdivo, let's talk about the differences in those offices, and people are very uncomfortable with the situation that these are state officers. The governor and the member of parliament are state officers, but at the same time, the member of parliament is supposed to be oversighting the expenditure of whether it's the national government or the county governments, whether they are in the Senate or in the National Assembly. How do you justify that?
In fact, Sam, you've hit the nail on the head. If the checks and balances that have been worked in the Constitution were working as they should have, there should be no need, one, of even such scandals. But over and above that, even with such scandals, requiring people to stay away from office. Remember, this is happening because we wrote a Leadership and Integrity Act that made it almost impossible for people to have, how do I put it, accountability when they're under investigation. And so short of being fired from office, you find that you're able to continue carrying out your functions without any, let me say, any other buffer, rather than being removed from office. What is happening with the governors is actually very unfair, because we are paying people for work that they're not doing. We are there saying we have a governor and he's unable to carry out the functions of a governor. So even the ones who have elected him are getting the short end of the stick. If our laws were written as they were supposed to, and I have particular a particular bone to pick with the Leadership and Integrity Act, and I'm glad that we have two members of parliament here, because you need to fix that act to be effectual and give Chapter 6 life. What needs to happen is, even if you're under investigation, you should be able to pass on your duties to your deputy or to somebody else substantive, so that they are able to carry out the functions that would be deemed to be interfering with what you're supposed to be doing, while the people are still receiving services. But that said, with the current situation where we are having governors having to step away from office, then we have seen like what has been happening in a county like Nairobi. The governor just employed a tactic of not appointing a deputy, having a non-effectual speaker, such that he leaves the vacuum deliberately to force you to keep him in office. So we need to rewrite our laws, but over and above that, the ones with oversight responsibilities have to be more robust in their oversight, so that we don't have a situation where we have to create a leadership vacuum to give the investigators the room to do their work.
Right, and Honorable Opiyo Wandayi now joins us. He's the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee. Good morning, sir. And we are talking about the cost of corruption, and we are reacting to what has happened over the past 1 week. We've seen several leaders or corporate leaders, if you're talking about the Vice Chancellor of Masai Mara University or the former CEO of KPA, the slapping of the bell terms that also includes the debarment of governors from accessing their offices vis-a-vis legislators who just get a slap of 2 million shillings bail. Of course, it's within the courts to make that decision. What's your reaction, and what do you think would be more useful in as far as barring people from engaging in such crimes in the future?
Good morning, Sam, and thanks for having me on this show. First and foremost, this has been an eventful week, indeed. And as I've always said, the fight against corruption in this country has not been slowed down in the past on account of lack of the requisite laws or legal framework. It has been basically slowed down as a result of lack of adequate political goodwill. Now it's apparent that that political goodwill is available, and it's available at the very top. And that's why we are seeing these movements. You must also remember, Sam, that these independent institutions, that is the DCI, the EACC, the DPP, even though they are independent, as it were, they do not operate in an island. They don't operate in some vacuum. They operate within the context of our politics. And therefore, political goodwill from the very top is critical in the fight against corruption. And I must say that Kenya is fortunate that post the 2018 March handshake, that political goodwill has been apparent, and that's why we are seeing big heads rolling. My plea is that this continues, and I want to suggest that the relationship between the DPP, the DCI, and the EACC needs to be strengthened further for us to see more heads rolling as days go by. Or on the issue of the officers who have been charged in court, particularly the governors. If you have a reading of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, okay, a keen reading of that act will tell you that it is indeed necessary that once you have been charged with corruption, you need to step out of office, and not just stepping out. You need to hand over your office to somebody else to continue performing those functions. It is not conceivable that one can continue to draw public salaries and yet is not working for the public. On the issue of the bail terms, yes.
Does that include lawmakers like yourself?
If you ask me, that should include everybody. Every other person needs to be included, yes, in this bracket. And on the issue of bail terms, as you rightly put it, well, the law gives the court latitude to determine how much bail one is supposed to pay. And again, you know, bail has become a constitutional right since the advent of the 2010 Constitution. And therefore, we can only hope that the courts will continue to apply themselves properly in terms of determining the bail terms. Yes.
Right. And Honorable Wanga, I want to take you back to the situation, because sometimes you've seen yourselves, as you go to seek clearance to run, you have to get clearance from EACC, from the DCI, if you're talking about the, what do you call it, certificate of good conduct. But many a times that you still be cleared by IEBC to run as long as you have not exhausted all avenues of appeal. So does this really help the framework that we have in the Constitution of Integrity, Chapter 6, and also the Act that we have of integrity, leadership and integrity? Has it helped to tame people that would be having the baggage of court cases or even suspicion of criminal offenses? Has it helped to ensure that they do not access the public coffers?
So Sam, first let me talk to the issue of treating, how legislators are treated vis-a-vis how governors are treated. And I still stick to my earlier point. What is the point of asking a governor, for example, not to access his office? Because there could be documents there could be work that he could do that could interfere with investigations. If you're a member of parliament, how does barring you from, going to parliament interfere with anything? So I think there is a way the roles that people play, or officials, state officers play, there's a way their roles then affects the way the courts then operate in terms of whether you're asked to stay away from office or not. So I just wanted to make that point. I think as far as the clearance that elected officials get before they run, right now, so long as you have not been convicted, or you have a case ongoing and so on, you will be cleared to run. And I can see the principle of, innocent until proven guilty also now then applies. So there is a thin line there. So, but my proposal on this matter is how can we hasten, how can we put timelines on corruption cases so that they are over and done with within the shortest time possible. You remember, Sam, and I've said this before, when we had election petitions without timelines. So election petitions ran from the first year of your election, and it was determined, a verdict was given in the 5th year. That way, justice was defeated, because if a verdict is given in the 5th year that you did not win properly, then it's justice delayed and therefore defeated. But when we put that election petitions must be determined within, 6 months in the High Court and 1 year in the Court of Appeal and in the appeal processes, then now people can, go back to elections quickly and justice is then served. This is the way we should deal with corruption matters. We should put timelines within which these cases should be resolved. And as you said earlier, some of this take too long. If we put timelines within which the cases are resolved, then convictions will have been handed. And if you're a convicted, criminal in any way, then the EACC and the EACC, when you go for clearance, will not clear you to run for public office. That way, we have dealt with the matter. So we must look at how to make this quick so that both the accused and the accuser are served justice.
All right. And Joem Mdivo, of course, you refer to that there needs to be enhancement of the integrity and leadership law in the country. But what do you think? Because even if you have a court case and there is real strong evidence, as long as you are not convicted and exhausted all avenues of appeal, you can still run for office. What do you think needs to be done, because you still remember that you need to bring honor to the office that you hold?
Thank you, Sam. Today you're oozing wisdom, because that's exactly the problem with our laws. Honorable Wandai says we have enough laws, which is true. We have plenty of laws. Problem is our laws are not effective. Let me start from the beginning. The fact that we even need political goodwill to fight corruption is a glitch in the system. The system should be able to run whether or not there is political goodwill. The laws should be able to function whether or not there is political goodwill. The laws should be able to function even for the executive. It shouldn't be some people are too big to touch. Remember, even the protection that is given to the president is to protect the office for the tenure that he's in office. But the moment he steps out of office, the system and the law should be able to apply to him as well. But we've come to a place in Kenya where we have a certain class of people who the law somehow is suspended in mid-air when it comes to them. So case in point, the governor of Nairobi. We know he's a convicted felon. I know this for a fact because I was working in Mombasa at some time, and I know he had cases and he was a convicted felon. Now, if you have convictions, but you are still able to get clearance, it tells us that the law is weak. And the clearances he got were not fake clearances. It's because the law allowed him to still be able to get it. So we put Chapter 6 in the Constitution, but how we implemented it was ineffectual. And my contention is that the ineffectuality was worked in on purpose. That requirement, for example, that you must wait until not just your conviction, but all avenues of appeal are exhausted before you can be barred from office, flies in the face of logic. So, for example, let's look at this case with Honorable Waluke. He has been convicted, but until he exhausts all his appeals, if by the time we are coming to 2022 and he has the appeal still pending, do you know he still potentially could get clearance because the law has been worked in a way that he can be able to exploit it. We need to write laws that mean what we say. Like, for example, if we're talking about as in a company and the chief accountant has been accused of fudging funds, what do? Even if you don't fire him, you tell him, oh, step aside while I look into this matter. But in Kenya, with the political class, we act in the opposite manner. In my opinion, one of the commissions that we shouldn't have done away with was the Commission on the Implementation of the Constitution, the CIC, because they were the ones who were ensuring that the laws are being drafted with as much spirit of the Constitution in it as possible. And once they went away, then Parliament has been left to, just basically deal with matters as they deem fit. And as far as I'm concerned, that's part of our weaknesses, because we have the EACC, we have the DCI, we have the DPP, we have the police who generally do, the investigation officer and the regular OB matters. But over and over again, I have said we have used the system to also aid people get away with corruption. Because I bring you up with this matter, let's look at Aurora and Kimeret, for example. And you've got a charge sheet with I don't know how many counts. You've got accused persons of I don't know how many in one charge sheet. You want one judicial officer to listen to a battery of 50 lawyers and deliver a reasoned judgment within 1 year. How does that make sense? Let me also address that issue of saying we need time limits on corruption matters. As a legal practitioner, I'll tell you, the disruption that election petitions bring to the entire justice system is complete. It's just nonsense. The reason is this. We tell other Kenyans, you have been in court for 100 years, but we don't care about you. We have to deal with this specific class of citizens for this time because you know what? They're so special, their cases have to be heard first.
But don't you think
because it's written in the law, but it is so inefficient at the end of the day for the rest of the Kenyans because nothing else functions until you're done with elections petitions. And it's all the way till MCA seats. That disruption
but
of the
Joy,
system makes the judiciary...
Don't you think it also serves the public interest because they need to be represented, whether it's at the county assembly level or at the national level?
My point is, if election petitions have the potential of disrupting court processes for all of 1 year, imagine if we did that also for corruption cases, especially for elected officials. The courts will be doing nothing but politically public interest cases. And yet, the members of the public still need a service.
Okay.
So then it's up again to our legislators. Let us write laws that make sense. So if you want a special court to deal with special corruption cases, fund it. Like right now, the judiciary is understaffed. We have been talking about having more judges put on. What have we been doing to ensure that more judicial officers are gotten on? There's a stalemate.
Okay.
So we have to mean what we say.
Okay.
And we have to give life to what we've written in our laws.
I'm sure the lawmakers on the line have a lot to say about that. But as you do so, Opiyo Wandayi, you're the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and your committee has been going through the expenditure of different organizations within government. Do you have any track record of issues that you've investigated and gotten to the extent of being prosecuted? Because the last one I remember is from the previous parliament where we had the youth fund situation that was taken to court, but unfortunately those that had been charged passed on, so that matter was sort of stalled. Do you have a record of work that you've done that has ended up being prosecuted in court into convictions?
Sam, if you take a keen interest in the workings of the Public Accounts Committee that I chair in the National Assembly, you will of course realize that my committee has been able to make very, very specific recommendations on very, very specific persons, okay, regarding very, very specific issues. We have been able to cover the financial years from 2014, 2015, all the way up to 2016, 2017. We are currently dealing with 2017, 2018. And if you went to the records of Parliament, and indeed on the website, you will see our reports are live. And these recommendations require implementation by other agencies as to how far they have gone in terms of implementation. My committee doesn't have jurisdiction over it. Now, it is also important, Sam, to understand that the Public Accounts Committee deals with issues that have been highlighted by the Auditor General in his annual audits. And these issues are issues that largely touch on matters of use of public funds. Some you will find in under Article 201, okay? One of the principles of public finance is prudence and responsibility. Prudence and responsibility. And from my experience in Public Accounts Committee, the issues we have in this country, particularly touching on corruption, stem from procurement of development projects. And this happens in a way that projects or procurement is designed with the vendor in mind. Now, what we have been saying all along in our reports is that let's have these persons, these accounting officers, who have been responsible for public funds, okay, charged in court, or investigated, and if found culpable, taken to court and charged and possibly convicted to serve as a deterrent to the rest of the country.
Has it
now,
happened?
Well, you know, that happened in the manner we have envisaged because of one reason or another. But that does not mean that our work has been curtailed in any way. We have continued to do our work, and the public must continue to support us so that the public gets value for their money. That is the most critical thing, Azam. Yeah.
Right. Okay, all right. I hear you clearly. I'll be asking you further questions in regards to your work at the committee. But first of all, let's take a short break. When we return, we'll be diving into other conversations that have been informing the war on corruption in the country, including the suspicions that have bedeviled the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority currently that is under scrutiny. We have that after the break.